Hello, I'm John Rossi, a touring drummer with a love of all things animal. When I'm on the road, I visit as many zoos, aquariums... Hey, wait a minute. What's going on? Hey, what's going on there? Hello? 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 We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you Rossifari Zoo news. News you can use from the world of zoos and conservation. Every week, we bring you breaking news and analysis from around the globe, featuring the animals you love and the people who care for them. And here's your anchorman, John Rossi. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to Rossifari Zoo News, your look at everything going on in the world of zoos, aquariums, conservation, and general animal weirdness. And I am your host, John Rossi, and I am here to remind you that Zoo News is a crowd-sourced news program. So if you happen to see anything that you think would be particularly zoo newsworthy, you can go ahead and tag me in it on the socials at Rossifari or at RossifariPod on TikTok. You can also email it to me, rossifaripod@gmail.com. And whether I use your story or not, I will say your name at the end of the episode, which is pretty cool. And actually, speaking of that whole situation there, I want to let y'all know that with the exception of the intro and the outro this week, which I held on to the very end here, I actually recorded the body of this episode very early on in the week. My week has been absolutely and wonderfully crazy and jam-packed, which is nice, but also I just knew I wasn't going to have time to do Zoo News on like a Wednesday night or on Thursday like I often do. So if you are a person who sent me a story later on in the week, it's not on here. But I save them all, and I might use them next week. But also, you will still hear your name at the end of the episode because I held off on the beginning and the end. So that is all that is going on with that. And let's see. Let's talk about my world. So this week has had a couple of really cool moments. For starters, I went out and participated in voting. And I got to do early voting. It was really cool. I tried to go during the day, and I checked out a couple different places, but the lines were astronomically long. And I noticed that the people who were there for early voting were largely in your senior citizen crowd, which, you know, cool, whatever. But I didn't want to wait in line a couple hours. But then I remembered that early voting in my county, I guess, is open until 9 p.m. And I thought, I bet these people won't be out in droves at 9 p.m. because they'll be watching Matlock or sleeping. And so at about 8:15, I went and voted, and there were 0 people ahead of me. So it was very cool to participate in the democratic process in the United States. And look, I try to keep things not political on here. I know that we all need places to run and hide from the craziness of the world right now. But I will say this, no matter who you support, I hope that you go out and vote. And the other thing that I will say is, you know, I just want to let y'all know that one of the reasons that I vote is because I care about the world and about climate change and about science. And because of that, unfortunately, we only have one candidate in this country right now that really believes in those things and cares about those things. And it is not our former president. The Trump administration was actually pretty terrible for a lot of animals, wolves in particular. And so if that is something that you care about, I hope that you consider that when you go to the polls. And that's as far as I'm going to go with all of that. But thanks for listening. And if you are in the United States and able to vote, I hope that you do fulfill your democratic duty, really, because it's a duty. But let's move on from that. Other fun things this week, I actually recorded an episode of NEI's Tech Talks podcast where I was the guest. And I think that'll be coming out in the end of November. I think they said somewhere around that timeline. But it was really fun to sit down with our good buddy Chris, who you've heard on the podcast before, and with Ari Bailey, who I hadn't had a chance to talk to or really meet much yet. And so it was a lot of fun to talk to them. And there are some surprises in the episode. And it was a very different different kind of interview than I've done on other podcasts. So keep your eyes out for that. And of course, I'll let you know when it's coming. But that was a great time. And then last but not least this week, it was Halloween. Yesterday, if you're listening to this on the day that it came out. And as I try to do every year, I got to spend it with Miles, and he was an astronaut. So I went as an alien, and rather than just buy an alien costume, I went all in on creating a crazy one. So let's see here. I'll start at the bottom. I have these really funky multicolored shoes that my mom got me a while ago, and I haven't had many opportunities to wear yet, but they were my alien shoes. And then I wore the weird red kind of fake vinyl pants, I don't really know, that I wore on Saturday Night Live and then got to keep as my funky alien pants. And then I wore a black t-shirt that Zoe decorated with a drawing of a spaceship in sparkly, puffy paint for me. And then I put on green, sparkly makeup and a purple, sparkly makeup dot on the end of my nose for some reason, and had green sunglasses that were like alien eye sunglasses, and a long green and neon yellow wig that was my alien hair with like little like antenna on top. It was a lot of fun, and a lot of people seemed to get a kick out of it. And I also had a ray gun. I had a ray gun. I got to shoot people with my ray gun. It didn't make rays. It only made noise, but it made me really happy. And yeah, so Miles and I had a lot of fun, and my parents came up for it, and his mom and stepdad and his two sisters came, and it was a great time. We had a great time together. I even got candy because I was in costume. So yeah, I hope y'all, if you do the Halloween thing, had a good time. And don't worry, there are pictures of me as an alien and Miles as a spaceman up on Instagram for you to check out. And so with all of that said, I think it is time. Let's get to it.
We've been taking care of pandas and the seals, taking care of pandas, feeding meals. We've been taking care of pandas with 2 news, taking care of pandas and picking up their poos, pooping out.
All right, so the biggest headline story this week actually comes from the world of conservation news. And y'all, it is a doozy. The IUCN has officially uplisted the African penguin from endangered to critically endangered. This is, obviously, the last step before extinction. The species has lost 97% of its population, and it is estimated that unless major changes happen, this incredible bird will be gone in just a little over a decade. African penguins face many threats, but perhaps the biggest one is overfishing by humans. You guessed it. Sardines and anchovies are the main food sources for African penguins, and the vast majority of commercial fishing of these species is not done with sustainable practices. When penguins don't get enough food, not only do they risk death by starvation, they also tend to breed less and have lower success rates while breeding, making this a huge issue for the birds in multiple ways. In fact, the situation has become so dire that Sandcob is actually suing the government of South Africa to try to get the courts there to force the government to enact better protections for the penguins and their food sources. And while that is the main threat facing the penguins, there is also the whole avian influenza thing that is still, traveling around the globe, as well as predation, climate change, and other issues that combine to make this a perilous time for African penguins, which is, by the way, the first species of the 18 species of penguin to be declared critically endangered. And, what's crazy about this to me, beyond the obvious, holy crap, it's crazy that humans keep destroying species, we should really stop that thing, is that these are African penguins. People love penguins. And I think that the average person, when they picture a penguin, probably pictures an African penguin. Though To be fair, they probably picture them hanging out with polar bears because for some reason, that is often how they are shown in books and toy sets and everything. You may remember our good friend Katie Propp of Penguins International getting pretty worked up about that on our podcast multiple times. But this isn't some crazy antelope species most people haven't, heard of. This is a species that is as charismatic as any species out there. I'm literally wearing comfy pants with African penguins on them right now as I record this. They are also considered to be a symbol of South Africa, and yet the government is doing next to nothing to help save them. This is a shocking development, and it's absolutely heartbreaking to see. There is a plus side to the story, of course, and that is that when an animal is declared to be critically endangered, governments do often step up protections in very meaningful ways. It also tends to make the general public more aware of the plight of the animal. I think that we hear that so many animals are endangered nowadays that the impact of the word on its own has actually lost some oomph when dealing with the general public. And especially people who go to zoos where they, see a lot of endangered species because zoos are helping to preserve them. But yeah, hopefully this distinction will get people to care more and to be more involved in the conservation work for African penguins. Because, we might lose African penguins in the next decade is a heck of a better headline than African penguins are endangered, just like every zoo and aquarium animal you've ever fallen in love with. And, while it is estimated that we average the loss of one species a day, most of these species are unheard of by the general public. So hopefully this announcement will create a groundswell of support for African penguins. And add to it the fact that conservation organizations such as SANCOB and Penguins International exist and already have the infrastructure in place and connections in place to help save this species. And it's pretty easy to see that this uplisting could actually turn back into a downlisting relatively quickly as these things go. And, as for now, that's what I'm going to try to take away from this story. Some hope in the face of despair. Here's hoping it's not misguided. And that brings us to our births for the week. Wild Discovery, a small zoo in Lancashire in the UK, has announced the birth of a bintlet. Born to parents Dougal and Bima, this little one is the second bintlet the pair has had. The entire family, including older brother Raffles, are doing super well together. Names under consideration for the little one currently include Rhea, Doris, Eileen, and Mrs. Doyle. I really love it when animals get like a Mrs. or Mr. or Doctor or something in front of their name. But also, I don't know, the idea of a binturong named Eileen, I'm a fan, not gonna lie. The Chattanooga Zoo, or Chattanooga, has welcomed pied tamarin twins to the world. Parents Daphne and Dudley gave birth to the two critically endangered animals, and both parents are doing a great job with the little ones. Not only are pied tamarins critically endangered, but they are also not found in a lot of zoos. Only 6 facilities in the U.S. feature these little monkeys. And speaking of little monkeys, the Melbourne Zoo has announced the birth of meerkat pups, which admittedly are not monkeys, but I couldn't think of a better segue. Parents Malu and Toto brought the latest additions to the mob into the world, and this brings the total number of meerkats born at the zoo this year up to 10, which is absolutely incredible. So congrats to the team and apparently the very horny meerkats at the zoo. Riverbanks Zoo in South Carolina has announced the hatching of a toco toucan chick. It's the first time a toco toucan has hatched at the zoo in over a decade. The chick and its parents will be behind the scenes as the older birds teach the new one how to fly, but you'll be able to see the whole family in early spring at the zoo. And then last but not least in births this week, the Taronga Western Plains Zoo has welcomed 2 critically endangered Addax calves to the herd. Incredibly, one of the two was born right at the front of its habitat, with about 100 guests watching. The young ones will grow and develop on exhibit at the zoo, but they might be hard to see as Addax often stash their young in safe hidden spaces. Still, worth a trip to see these little ones, which are, not surprisingly, super adorable. And that brings us to our deaths for this week, and we are starting this section by saying goodbye to an incredible animal I had the privilege and pleasure to spend a lot of time with this year. The Aquarium of Niagara has announced the passing of Araya, a 32-year-old Humboldt penguin. She was born in Milwaukee in 1992 and moved to Aquarium of Niagara in 2002. Earlier this week, Araya's care team noticed that she was eating less and seemed a little off, so the veterinary team started to look into what was wrong, but she passed naturally overnight. The median life expectancy of Humboldt penguins is 17 years, so 32 is an incredible age for a penguin. On a personal note, I spent a lot of time with Araya when I started volunteering at the aquarium. As an older penguin, Araya got a lot of special treatment. Her and her mate Nino lived behind the scenes for much of the last year because of her age and some mobility issues, and I regularly cleaned in the area where they were, with Araya and Nino both very happily investigating my cleaning and my pants and occasionally my hands with their beaks. Then, as my responsibilities grew, I also got to help with her hoop treatments. Now, this is a treatment that helped with her arthritis and literally involved me holding a hoop around her as we sat together. So I've spent lots of time talking to Araya and laughing as she would get bored and try to wander off, or having Nino come to make sure I wasn't causing problems for his lady. Doing hoop treatments for Araya and for Tux, who passed away a few months ago, has been the single biggest honor of my time at the aquarium. I miss Araya dearly. My first time preparing vitamins for the colony without her, the day after she passed, just felt so wrong. One of the primary penguin keepers was like, 13 is a stupid number. And I was like, 13 is a really stupid number because that's what our colony size is. And we preferred 14 or even 15 before Tux passed away, you know? And I'm so grateful for all the one-on-one time we had together and all the moments that she made me laugh and made me fall even more in love with the species. And also for the times I had to dodge her poop as I held her in her hoop between my legs. Penguins, man. Whew. But yeah, all of us at the aquarium miss Araya so much. But it is really awesome to know that we got to have such an amazing bird and such a unique personality in our lives. The Racine Zoo has said goodbye to Papa Yule, the white-handed gibbon that was the longest tenured resident at the zoo, having lived there since 1986. Yule was 58 years old at the time of his passing, far outliving the life expectancy of up to 30 years for the species. In his decades at the zoo, Yule fathered 6 daughters and developed a very special relationship with one keeper in particular, Crystal Champeau, who was his caretaker for 18 years. His incredible personality and constant presence at the zoo will be sorely missed. And then the Pittsburgh Zoo and Aquarium has said goodbye to Ivan the gorilla. Ivan was beloved at the zoo by the staff and the public, to whom he was a true icon. Sadly, while undergoing a veterinary procedure at the zoo, Ivan suffered a cardiac arrest and he passed away. The procedure was done not only by the vet staff at the zoo, but they also had brought in a support team, including a double board-certified specialist in zoological medicine and anesthesiology, a cardiologist, and an emergency pulmonary cardiologist. Despite all of this, it was Ivan's time. These experts were brought in despite there being no pre-existing condition pertaining to his heart, because gorillas, much like humans, are known to be susceptible to cardiac disease. Ivan was 11 years old at the time of his passing. As an interesting fact, we've talked about the fact that many animals at zoos have a public name and then their true name. And that was true of Ivan, whose true name was Djembe, like the African hand drum. Goodbye, Ivan. And that brings us to the rest of our zoo news for the week. And we start off with some huge news out of the Rosamond Gifford Zoo in Syracuse. Yad and Tukadad, the 2-year-old twin elephants at the zoo, have been given the newly developed EEHV vaccine that has been being tested at the Houston Zoo. Now, we've been tracking the battle against this disease on Zoo News for years now, and we even did an episode with Dr. Lauren Howard of the San Diego Zoo Safari Park about the efforts to confront it, and it is just so satisfying to know that the 2 most famous young elephants in the U.S. have now received this new vaccine. The rollout of the vaccine has been slow and cautious, as it should be, but this is a huge step in showing that it can protect the population of elephants in human care. And if that's the case, then there is even hope that it can be delivered to some of the wild population, which also suffers from this disease. What an amazing story to get to have tracked in real time. I am so excited these twins got this. And sticking with elephants for a moment, Sedgwick County Zoo recently had to perform a unique dental procedure on Callie, one of the male African elephants at the zoo. Callie was sparring with Titan, another male elephant at the zoo, and in the process, Callie broke one of his tusks at the pulp cavity. And, to be clear, the tusk was broken but didn't break completely off. So this led to a lot of bleeding, as well as the obvious break in the tusk, so the veterinary team had to step in to try to repair the tusk to prevent further damage and infection. The zoo called in Dr. Winter, a boarded veterinary dentist who is certified in zoo and wildlife dentistry, and the team performed what is basically an elephant root canal. The procedure went very well, and Callie is recovering beautifully. If there's one thing I take away from this story, it's don't mess with anyone named Titan. But, also, congrats to the zoo. I want to give a huge shout out to the horticulture team at the Cincinnati Zoo. They joined forces with the Cincinnati Parks Department and an organization called Mad Tree to plant over 200 trees in Avondale Park in Cincinnati. This was the largest single tree planting event to ever take place in a single day in Cincinnati. The hope here is that by planting more trees, the humans that only travel through forested areas will have their broken up habitats reconnected, so they will be able to move through more of the area and find mates that are trapped in a... No, wait. That's why we plant trees in areas like Nepal for red pandas and to reforest those areas, right? In this case, it's just to help the overall wellness of the neighborhoods in Cincinnati. But all jokes aside, this is an awesome project, and it's so cool that the amazing horticulture team of the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens, let's not forget that part of it, went to be, a part of this project. Having experts of that caliber out doing the work not only shows the importance of the work, but ensures it is being done at the highest level. I find this next story fascinating. So there was some controversy that hit the news recently at the newly reopened Xiaomisha SeaWorld Aquarium in China. And I believe this is not like a SeaWorld brand owned by SeaWorld Aquarium, kind of thing. Anyway, the aquarium has been closed for renovations for 5 years. And as they decided to reopen, they heavily touted their whale shark exhibit in advertising. But when the park reopened, and specifically the whale shark exhibit opened, the 100,000 plus aquarium goers who showed up in the first week were surprised to find that the whale shark in question is a robot. And this is not the John jokes about okapis being robots kind of thing. The aquarium actually spent millions of yuan to commission a life-sized whale shark robot that swims through the exhibit with live sea creatures, and it moves in a naturalistic motion and even opens its mouth and does other whale shark things. In fact, the robotic whale shark is one of the most impressive feats of technology I've seen used at a zoo or aquarium. But the aquarium never actually said in their advertising that it was going to be a robot. So people rolled in expecting to see a real whale shark. And instead, there was the swimming version of Wall-E. And look, while the robot is incredible, it's very clearly a robot. The aquarium was not trying to act like it is a real whale shark. They weren't like trying to punk their guests in that regard. It looks like a robotic version of a whale shark, and they were not trying to fake people out in that way. But the PR people apparently did not get that message. Guests were furious, with many demanding refunds. And when asked why they did this, the aquarium stated that laws in China don't allow for whale sharks to be kept in aquariums, so this was the only way to teach about whale sharks at their newly reopened aquarium. And actually, I have to say, I don't hate that idea. Now, I do hate that the PR and marketing team and upper management weren't upfront with people. That's a problem. But I think a robotic whale shark, along with the reopening of, an aquarium that they'd been waiting for 5 years, would definitely have been enough to get bodies in the door. I would certainly go to a facility to see something like this incredible robot. But lying about it created a ton of controversy and angered a lot of people. So, not great. Or is it? Because let's be honest here, it also got the aquarium a ton of press globally and put videos of their impressive electronic whale shark all over the web. So maybe this was actually a masterful marketing campaign that brought awareness of both the reopening of the aquarium and the very cool whale shark robot to the entire world in one fell swoop, only costing the aquarium the cost of the people's admissions when they complained. Not saying that's the case, not much of a conspiracy theorist, but maybe whether it was intentional or not, it's fair to say that it seems like that is what happened. Our friends at the Nashville Zoo have sent 2 zookeepers, Jenna and Brittany, to help the conservation organization Save Giraffes Now with a giraffe translocation. The keepers are helping monitor the translocated animals and are also learning from Save Giraffes Now about the work they do. I love seeing zoos send keepers off to do projects like this. I truly believe it helps the keeper's perspective back at their facilities, and obviously their expertise with animals in human care also helps educate people working with animals in the field about what they get to see. So, very cool. The Newquay Zoo has launched some new animal adoption packages, and they are so cool and unique that I have to mention them here. Even though I'm going to start off by saying that unless you live in the UK, you can't actually get the full package. So this is for a very small number of my listeners, but it's still worth mentioning. The packages include a plush animal, a wooden box with the animal on it, which is created entirely from sustainable, renewable wood, and more really cool stuff. And the species currently available include red panda and Humboldt penguins, which are very cool, but not exactly a shocker. But you can also adopt a Hoffman's sloth, Carpathian lynx, and a Philippine spotted deer. Those are not animals you can adopt most places, and the packages and the plushies look incredible. Newquay, as I mentioned, is in the UK, and so the adoption packages are only available there, but they do offer digital adoptions that don't have all the cool swag, but you could still adopt one of those animals. And hey, if you have friends in the UK, they might be willing to ship stuff to you because honestly, these are some of the coolest adoption packages I have ever seen. And last but not least in zoo news this week, I did a thing, and I'm pretty proud of it, so I wanted to share. I am a big fan of Freakonomics, including their books and their podcast and their newer podcast, The Economics of Everyday Things. So I was really excited to pull up their latest episode to see that it's all about the economics of zoo animals. And as I hoped, the story focused on the AZA and SSPs and how zoos and aquariums in that organization don't buy and sell animals to each other, but instead do all the things we talk about on here every week. So I dove into the episode and overall I enjoyed it, but there were some things that the details were just a little off on. And one thing in particular that they said that really bothered me. So I did something I almost never do. And I actually wrote an email to the team at the Economics of Everyday Things, detailing my concerns and why I think what bothered me matters. And I did that and went to bed thinking I'd never hear anything back, but that at least I had done my part. So imagine my surprise when early the next morning, I got an incredibly detailed response from the podcast, taking every one of my concerns point by point and addressing them, including sharing their sources with me. This led to an incredible, polite, and honestly very efficient back and forth, which ended with a revised version of the episode being released, incorporating changes based on my concerns. It also has opened up a dialogue between me and the AZA, as one of the sources I found to be a problem actually came from the AZA. And once it was shown to me, I totally see why the Freakonomics team presented this particular topic as they did. And I'm purposely being a bit vague here because there's no reason to call out the issues that I had because they got them fixed. And I'm talking to the AZ about things on their side, so there's no reason to go into details on all that either. But it was so cool to be part of that process. And actually, the team at Freakonomics asked me to stay in touch as I do talk to the AZA more. They also listened to some episodes of Rossifari as part of the process, and apparently I have some new listeners over at the Freakonomics podcast. That's pretty cool. That's really exciting. So, first, not going to lie, I'm proud to be able to have had that impact on a very popular podcast that gets listened to by a lot of people. Second, I'm super impressed with the team at Freakonomics, and especially, the people at the podcast that I was talking to, right? The Economics of Everyday Things. It was a dream interaction, one that could have been ignored or contentious, but they took someone who was already a big fan and made me even fannier? That's not a word. I don't know. I have a big fanny. No, wait. Anyway, and third, what a cool opportunity to hopefully help the AZA clean up one of their own sources that I think could be written a little bit clearer, let's say. So go ahead and listen to the Economics of Everyday Things, not just for the zoo animals episode, but to learn about how just so many things work economically. If you've ever looked at something and thought, how does this make money? Or is there really enough of a demand for this? Or how is this a business model that makes sense at all? The podcast will answer that question for you, do it very well, and in a very easy to digest way. And as I recently found out, they take it all very seriously too. So yeah, highly recommend.
Conservation, news time. Oh yeah.
All right, so we started this episode with a sad uplisting story, so now we're going to start this section with a happy downlisting story. The U.S. Department of the Interior has announced the downlisting of the red-cockaded woodpecker from endangered to threatened. This is a great example of conservation work making a huge difference for a species many people haven't even heard of, ever. And it, also serves as a reminder that we can not only help save species like this bird, but can come together to save the African penguin as well. So yay conservation and yay this very cool woodpecker species. Oh, and speaking of population increases, the North Atlantic right whale population has increased from 358 in 2020, the lowest recorded population of the species, to 370 this year. Now, while that's not a huge jump, it is a jump, and it's also evidence of a reversal of the trend of the population decreasing significantly from 2015 through 2020. NOAA Fisheries is very excited about the current number, and, here's hoping it keeps going up. And then last but not least, in conservation news this week, the first ever Great Indian Bustard chick has been born through artificial insemination at the Bustard Conservation and Rehabilitation Program's Breeding Center in Jaisalmer in India. This is a critically endangered bird species, which the program is desperately trying to increase the numbers of through breeding programs, and now can include artificial insemination in that. It is estimated that only 140 of the birds remain in the wild, so the success of this procedure is a huge step in being able to bring this bird species back from the brink. In other news, a famous grizzly bear has died in Wyoming after being struck by a car. The bear, known as number 399, was the oldest reproducing female grizzly in the Yellowstone ecosystem. Every year, bear enthusiasts would observe her den in the hopes of being the first to announce how many cubs she had to her fan base online. And over the years, she had at least 18 cubs. One thing that helped make her an online celebrity was that she would often hang out close to roads, especially with her cubs. This allowed a lot of people to see her and post photos and videos of her online. Scientists believe she came up with this as a strategy to keep male grizzlies away, as they will stay away from roads and cars in particular. And that matters because male grizzlies are believed to kill cubs to make the mother go back into heat. So this strategy helped keep her cubs alive as well as her. Sadly, staying close to roads ended up being her undoing. Her fans will miss her dearly. And finally, the Durango police recently went on a crazy high-speed chase. The culprit? A red kangaroo. The kangaroo got away from its house because it's a privately owned kangaroo, and that's what often happens in these situations, and it escaped and got chased by the police. The officers did a great job corralling the marsupial and returning it to its owner, and the police body cams of the incident are pretty funny, not gonna lie. That said, this is the latest example of why exotic animals should not be kept as pets, but I know y'all know that.
Oh, animal, animal holidays. Animal, animal holidays. Hey!
All right, it is November, which is crazy since it's November of 2024, and I'm pretty sure that it just started being 2021 yesterday, but anyway, November is Manatee Awareness Month. And then for our individual days, the first is Stick Insect Day. The second is World Numbat Day and National Bison Day. The third is World Jellyfish Day and also launches Polar Bear Week, which is an entire week. And then the seventh is International Land Snail Day and National Hug a Bear Day, with the caveat that it should be a stuffed bear, obviously. So yeah, those are your animal holidays for the week. All right, so there you have it, folks. Another episode of Rossifari Zoo News is done. I would like to take a moment to say thank you to my patrons, especially my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, and Kevin Williams. And I would also like to say thank you to everyone who contributed to this week's episode. I'm talking about Anya Keene, Colleen Lenahan, Kim Cooley-Croninger, Kerry Kirkpatrick, Kevin Williams, Emily Rockbuck, Dr. Laura Schenk, Ali Malensky, Kay Malensky,
The Malenskys.
Crystal Chapman, Jay Meredith, Melissa Reed, Karen Musklow, Sam Evans, Jacob Zinn, Tiana, not Tiana, and certainly not Tiana Bush, Dr. Zoe Rossi, Lizard Dunlevy, Elizabeth Charles from the UK, yes, Sherry Weiss, Justin Williams, Holly Page, And y'all, we have a situation. We have yet another situation happening in the name list here. So last week I mentioned that there was a name that I mentioned, and it was the first time that you would have heard that name. And this person emailed me this week to tell me that I had, said their name wrong, which is fine. They were obviously braver than, Tiana, who didn't do that, cough, cough. But then they went ahead and told me in this email that it's hard to explain how to pronounce their name. So last week, I told you that Taryn Hanton sent me something. But apparently that's not how we say the name, but we don't know how to say it. So now I guess I just have to experiment. So this week I'm going to go with Taran Hanton. Taran? Am I close? Is it like Iran, but Taran? I don't know. But maybe Taran Hanton. And if not, I'm just going to keep guessing every week. So that'll be fun for y'all. But yes, thank you all so much for contributing. And hey, don't forget to be back here on Tuesday for our next interview episode. And then on Friday again for Zoo News. Yay! And until then, remember, friends, the words newsy credits backwards are Steiderk Yiswen.
The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.
The hatching of a toco toucan. Toku? It's toco. What the hell?